And Orunmila, right? The perfect match, the best relationship that Ochung ever had, man. There's so many Patakis that speak of their union and how positive it was and how blessed it was. The big one is 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗔, right? There's various parts to this epic tale that's there. One of the first ones is where Orunmila was a hunter, and the other hunters were jealous of him because he would just get these huge elk and deer and antelope and whatever else is in Africa. And they decided to set a trap for him. And when they did, he fell in the hole and he broke his legs. So this is the Ifa of the Good Samaritan, where everybody would walk by and laugh at him and no one would help him, right? So they say that a woman walked by and she saw him inside and said, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Absolutely not. You know, there was a dead deer down there and, you know, his legs were broken." And she's like, "Do you need help?" And he was like, "Desperately." So she took off all her clothes and she made a rope out of them. Ironically, she was on her menses. And the part that he had to grab was the part that, you know, was in contact with that. So originally he was like, but I got to get out of this hole. So he had to leave the deer and he hung on to that. And this woman actually pulled him out. You know, Chung, I mean, that's pretty strong to pull all that dead weight. So that's also why women can attend to Ifa on their menses. It's one of the few orishas that can be interacted with because Ochung saved Orula on her menses. So she took him in. She nursed him back to health. She fixed his legs. You know, he became completely infatuated with her. He fell in love with her. He said, "You know, I'll give you anything you ask of me." She said, "Well, give me a baby." You know, dude, do you remember New York from Flavor Flav?
Yeah.
Do you remember when she was talking to the guy at the dinner table and she's like, "I want a baby."
Yeah.
You remember that? She's so,
Tiffany, that's her
yeah,
name.
yeah. That's so funny, man. This is kind of what I think of when I read the Pataki. I got a very vivid imagination, Phil. And he did just that. Orula, you know, he did everything he could to give her a baby. And, you know, whether she conceived or not, he wasn't aware and he left, but he did, in fact, give her a child. So there's a interesting twist that happens here. In some versions, it was a boy. In the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 practice, 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏 was a boy. But in the 𝘃𝗶𝗹 practice, 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏 was a girl. And, you know, she grew up, and 𝗃𝗏𝗵𝗍 is the Ifa of the Hunger Games, where they would select one young lady to be sacrificed to Oduduwa 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗏. Even though 𝗃𝗏𝗵𝗍 speaks of Oduduwa 𝗃𝗍𝒪𝗏, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗏 was the Odua that would cover himself in blood. He's also in 𝗃𝗏𝗵𝗁𝗃. This Pataki is semi there as well. And they actually chose 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏 that year. So Ochung was very distraught, but she knew that her baby father was the head Babalawo in Ife, and he was actually the one who would facilitate and officiate the great sacrifice of the young girls to Oduduwa. So 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏, her whole life, had heard her mother talk about this story, about her father and the song that he sang to get her attention, to save him out of the hole. So when she was in the prison barracks or in her cell, she started singing the song mentioning Orunmila. So the prison guard, knowing exactly who the Oluonla, or the head priest of Ife was, went running to Orunmila to say, "Hey, there's this girl that's incarcerated that's saying she's your daughter." And he was like, "I don't got no kids." So he went running to the jail and he said, "Sing the song." And it was the exact same song he had sang so that Ochung would save him. So he said, "Oh my God, I think I got this lady pregnant like 14 years ago, bro." And he said, "What's your name?" She said, "My name is 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏." And he quickly realized he had to save her. Someone was actually kind enough to put the translation of 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏 in the comments, man. I think it's in the comments in 𝗃𝗏𝗵𝗍.
Oh, really?
Shout out to that person. It's somebody that avoids death or something like that, I believe. I gotta freshen up on that one. But what he did is with the help of Eshu, when they were going to sacrifice the girl, they switched the girl with a goat, right? And Oduduwa unwittingly ate the goat instead of a girl. And he's like, "Man, this year tastes really great." And then they showed the goat to Odua, and he's like, "What's the meaning of this?" He said, "Baba, I'm sorry, but the girl that we were going to sacrifice was my daughter, and I can't let that happen." And he said, "You know what? I'm not even worried about it. I like the goat more. All human sacrifice is done." and all the Orishas picked their animals, right? And Oshun came, Orula, he reconciled with her. In some versions they got together, in other versions they did not, but they had a beautiful co-parenting relationship. I like to think they got together, why not? And he was able to save his daughter. But there's also another story in 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗃 where it speaks of Oshun. And Oshun had a horrible divorce from Shango. And she was in her late 30s to early 40s. And Orunmila saw her crying by the river. And, he approached her and said, what's the matter? And she said, oh, horrible divorce. I'm just trying to get my life together. And he said, well, why don't we go out? And she kind of looked at him and she said, you've been very persistent. You've seen me fail with all these other men and you're still interested in me. Why? He said, because I know the caliber of woman you are. And, I think you're beautiful. And Oshun was appalled by Orula. And she said, do you understand that I can't have kids at this age? Like, you don't have kids. I don't have kids. Like, and he was like, well, we could try. You know what I'm saying? And they started dating and things like that. A bunch of adult activities happened. And out of nowhere, she actually became pregnant. That's why 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍𝗃 is an Odu that identifies why women can conceive up until the age of 50 and safely deliver. And I know of women that have been able to do it even past 50. Right, so it's really incredible science, whether it's ancient or modern, it's pretty much been happening. And they had their child and they named it 𝗃𝗏𝗍, right? It was he who averted death. And they lived happily ever after. Until this day, there's so many pataquis of Oshun and Orula. That's his Aphrodite, and she is, that's she's everything to him and he's everything to her.